Hello everybody, and welcome to today's Friday Live. It's the 13th of June, Friday the 13th. Hopefully nothing's going to go horribly wrong. We are dealing with some very high chroma reds today, so you never know. I've already had someone's in the community, their dog has eaten an entire tube of green gold, so anything could happen today. Very beautiful subject today, nasturtiums, and they are, sorry about that, turn my mic on. I think I was a little bit quiet there. It should be all right now. So the nasturtiums, really beautiful flowers, but they're very, very intense red. So before we actually do any painting today, I'm going to show you a couple of things about mixing really intense reds in light and in shadow. So depending on what tube paints you have, if you're painting along or if you're painting after the fact, watching the recording of this and painting, the first thing you need to accept is that you cannot hit that red that you see in that reference photo. I think that my camera, all cameras have biases, and I think that my camera has slightly exaggerated the red, a little bit maybe, but it is really intense. I mean, they're a little bit out of the way, so I can't reach them at the moment, but they are very intense, these nasturtiums. So I'm going to show you, depending on what tube paints you have, how you can get close to that color. So firstly, before we do anything else, let's have a quick look at the fabulous Chroma Magic. Hang on a second. We get the right screen up. There we go. So let's have a look at this reference photo in Chroma Magic, because it's going to tell us some interesting things about the color that we can see in there. Very intense reds, but actually the greens are quite intense as well. You know, it's interesting, but I mean, it's all about the reds, right? So let's get this normal size. So you can see, like, this is the main flower. Well, these two, but mainly this one, you know, is kind of the main flower in the composition. So the light color there, Chroma Magic is telling us it's a chroma 18. Now, you actually can't get that high a chroma in paint. It's not possible. You can get about here, maybe a little bit above, but you can't get all the way up there. So we just need to get as close as we possibly can. So we know that it's a value 5, though, so that's useful to know. And it's incredibly high chroma, orange-red. Shadow colors, also high chroma, but it's this kind of almost like a brick red, but heading slightly towards a blue red, but it's a low value, you know, it's like a value 2. Now that also is tricky. To get that high chroma at that lower value, you can't do that either. So you have to get just as close as you can and maybe fudge a couple of things. So for me, looking at this, obviously there's a huge amount of different reds in there. It actually goes very, very dark here and over here as well. But I would only mix 2. I'll get a general shadow color, something like this. A general light color, something like that, about value 5, highest chroma I can possibly get. And that's going to be it. That's all the colors I'm going to mix for those nasturtiums. Okay. But the leaves also are interesting. So I want a light and shadow for the leaves. So, you know, looking at, say, I mean, this is the kind of the main leaf shape over here, you know. So I know I want like pretty much a value 5 there. It's also high chroma, and it's a kind of a middle green, you would say, perhaps a slightly yellowish green. But when we come to mix it, I'll show you I'm going to use some blue-green in the mix to keep the chroma up. So that's a good light color. So then, you know, down here I can get some good shadow colors. But there's quite a few colors that are in between. You know, that's about the same as that. You wouldn't think it, would you? But it is. That's about the same. So probably a shadow color, we're going to want something around here, around a value 3. And if we get close to those colors and we mix them, then it's going to make everything a lot simpler. We'll just use those as a base, and then mix other colors around them to get there. So other stuff we might want to know. Look how beautiful that is, like the light coming through this vase. What you'd expect down here, low value orange. Slightly closer towards neutral in the light, but still fairly warm. But this is what I love about this setup, is this kind of almost a half moon, but slightly crescent moon sort of shape here. And the color of that is really close to gray. But interestingly, that's about the same value as this area back here in the background. So that gives you, I love to find these reference points, you know, where things are pretty much the same value. And I can say, well, I know that's about generally a value 5. That's a value 5. So if I make sure they're about the same value, then it gives me, you know, a starting place, if nothing else. Like this is about, well, that bit's about a value 6. There's about a value 5. There's about a value 5. You know, I like to see things that are about the same value. Really helps me. And it will help you. We're starting to paint. Okay, so now we've got an idea of the nature of the problem. Let's have a look at the palette. So we can don't need 2 palettes up. Let's switch that one off. So we can have a look at, you know, how are you going to mix that red? So I've got it up on my phone here as well. So it's giving me pretty much the same thing here. Incredibly intense, right? Oh, what I should do actually before I go any further is I've got to go into my settings. You don't need to see all my recently used apps, do you? Go into display, and I need to turn off adaptive brightness, and then I need to match the brightness of my phone. I usually match it to the white of my value scale so that the values are about the same. That looks pretty good. Go back to Chroma Magic. The problem that we have here is this is actually outputting light, you know, so we can't get to that. So this, to give you an idea, this is of about the same hue. This is a chip from the Munsell book, big Munsell book. The highest chroma you can get, which is a 14, I think. Yeah, 14. It looks almost dull compared to this, so we know we can't quite get that. But I think we can probably beat that a little bit. So what choices have you got to mix really high chroma reds? Yeah, Kate, I know what you mean. Kate says, waiting for the weather to break. So sticky. It is a little bit here as well. Hot and sticky. Just a bit tiring. Ginia says, did you lose your primrose supply in your move? No, we if anything, there's more of them grow around here. I haven't painted any. I watched them come out and go away again this year, and I didn't get around to painting any, which is a bit of a shame. Gonna have to wait until next spring now. Jacqueline says, I always want to see how painters paint intense red. Well, let's hope I don't mess it up. So here's one way you can do it. This paint here, this is Naphthol red. Let me bring my other light further over so I've got a bit more light on the palette. Naphthol red is a very high chroma, middle value, slightly below a 5, value 5. Slightly darker than that. But it's a nice orange red, but it's really, really high chroma. So if I put a little bit of that on that Munsell chip, you can hopefully see it's a little bit darker. So I'd want to lighten it with something. Now, if I lighten it with yellow, I would keep more chroma, but it would go a little bit too orange. So if I lighten it with white, this is lead white, to about the value that I want, about a value 5. It's good, you know, it's good, but it does lose just a little bit of chroma because I've added a little bit of white to it. So about a value 5 there has a little bit more chroma than this chip. That's Naphthol red, okay? That's one way you could do it. Incidentally, to check that's a value 5, obviously it's easy if you've got a chip like I've got there, but if you haven't got one, if you have this value scale, it only costs you 10 quid off eBay. How do you check? Show you the phone hack. I know a lot of you would have seen this before, but look, if I put a wodge of that paint, a little blob of it, onto my value scale, and then if I get into my phone, Now I've got my phone set to grayscale, right? So then if I hold my phone over that part of the value scale, you can see that there is the wodge of paint against the value with all of the chroma, all of the hue and all of the chroma basically removed. So that's how you can tell, you know, gives you a really good check to see if you're actually hitting your values right. The phone hack, incredibly useful. You know, all these things are just little learning tools. So you can try and mix a value 5, really high chroma red, and then you can check it. It gives you a feedback mechanism, and feedback mechanisms are basically like steroids for your practice. Chroma Magic shut down. I've got to wait for it to come back. Here we go. So if you don't have Naphthol red, I hardly ever get the Naphthol red out. It's very rare I want a red this intense, you know. But obviously we do today. What about, like, you know, on my materials list, my workshops, I usually put quinacridone rose and cad yellow. So you can actually mix those together. Start off with the quinacridone rose and bring it up to a value 5 with the cad yellow. And surprisingly, it won't be a million miles away from what we just mixed here with the Naphthol, because the quinacridone rose is a blue-red, so you can add quite a lot of yellow. It doesn't have quite the same chroma, but it's really, really close. Is that value 5? It kind of gets a little bit difficult when I've got my value scale and my phone on here. It's a little bit dark still. So, you know, if I want to make it a little bit lighter to make sure it's a 5, it starts to go orange. Can you see that? Starting to go a little bit orange. But that's one way that you could get really close. You know, there are other paints that will help you get there. So this here is Pyro. Really, really powerful staining red. This one is slightly more, like, I would say that's kind of a middle red, really. Pretty close to what we'd want. Francis says, what about Naphthol Scarlet? I've never even heard of Naphthol Scarlet. This is another Pyro red. This one's from Williamsburg. Honestly, there's not a lot to choose between these two. The Williamsburg and the Langridge one. Langridge comes from Australia. It's good paint. So let's get one of these. It's obviously, I can tell looking at that, it's a little bit below a value 5. We're going to have to bring it up. Let's try a little bit with yellow, because that would help us keep the chroma. And I don't mind if it goes a little bit more orange than it is. Intense, right? So this is hitting its highest chroma at a slightly lower value. So what you could do if you wanted to is accept that your light areas of your nasturtium would be slightly darker, slightly lower in value, in order to get the highest possible chroma you could. So you kind of have a choice about, you know, where you take this. We're getting closer to a 5. I think we're not quite there yet. I'm just seeing how far I can take this up, this Pyro red. Wow, that's intense. That's up near a value 5 now. You know, it's more intense than the Naphthol and white. It's still darker though. I've got to for it to be a fair comparison, I've got to bring them to about the same value. Yeah, we're getting there. It has more chroma than the Naphthol. That's Pyro red and cad yellow. It's got way more chroma than the quinacridone rose and cad yellow mix. I haven't got any cad red to hand because I stopped using cadmiums a long time ago, but not because because cadmium is harmful. I mean, I paint with lead white, you know, only because I think there are better choices. All of these reds that I've got on my palette at the moment are transparent colors. So there's that, you know, it makes it a bit more difficult for it to cover well. especially if you're painting into an oil layer, because it's transparent paint, you know. But I would rather fight with the transparency and get the chroma, especially if I'm painting on a white panel like we're going to be, you know. I just want that chroma to be as high as possible. Okay. Just show you a couple of things like the green. Let's say, like looking at the green, let's do a quick green mix. So we want something like this for the light color of our flowers. Now, I could start off with green gold, which is a yellow green. You could start off with something else like sap green or something, but they usually have, sap greens are usually mixes and they're usually not that high chroma. I think Old Holland is pretty good, but I've seen some that aren't. So, but that's way too dark, right? If I put yellow in that, it's going to go too yellow. So I'll put white in it, bring it up to the value that I want. It keeps its chroma fairly well, green gold. But that's way too yellow, right? Never fear, phthalo is here. Get some phthalo green. And I'm going to bring that up to a value 5 with cad yellow. That's like all the chroma you could ever want. But it's a very blue-green, isn't it? But if I mix somewhere between these two, to get a big wadge of that green-gold mix, we get a smaller amount of this because it's very blue-green, and then you can kind of mix between them. Decide, you know, how blue or yellow-green you want it to go, so you have a lot of control there. And that'll get you a lot closer. What's the value? It's about a 5, a little bit dark maybe. It's not as high chroma as this color here. Bring some more yellow in to bring it up. Still can't quite get the chroma of that green, but I can get reasonably close. Actually, no, that is pretty much there. Chroma is pretty much there. Yeah, that's good. I'll keep that actually. I'll put that. Value 5 green. So that's a good way to mix intense greens. It is pretty tricky to mix intense greens, which is why I wanted to show you that as well. So, you know, you look at this photo and you think, yeah, nice, you know, a bit of red and a bit of green and a lot of greys, and should be able to mix that no problem. Should be able to hit those colors. And actually, they're pretty tricky. Okay. Interesting, huh? A little diversion on color mixing. Jacqueline says, oh gosh, back to the art store for me. I don't have these reds. I know, it's like, I ended up with these reds through painting red roses and just striving for, I suppose, a little obsessively, the highest chroma colors that I could get in various hues and at various values to try and make sure that I've got the fullest range possible in my paint. And then I use what I call the chroma droppers, ivory black and raw umber, to drop chroma if I need to. So I don't use earths because they're encapsulated within everything that I've got here. But I've actually got more colors out here than I usually have. Stephanie says, have you ever used Old Holland, what's that? Scheveningen red medium. I have no idea what that word means, but I have a tube. I haven't used it. I'd be interested to know what the pigment is in there. Alfie's mum says, why isn't your chroma magic not working? I don't understand the question. Why isn't it not working, or why isn't it working? Why isn't it not working? It's not working because, well, it's working. I'm sorry, I'm not being facetious. Please repeat the question and let me know. Jan says, Vasari makes permanent bright red high chroma, 4.5 out of the tube. Yeah, that's the value, right? I would guess these are all kind of, they're a little bit lower than that, probably 4.5. How are we going to approach this painting? I've got to think about this. I have a feeling that I could do it just by, like I did the last two, just by painting everything and then wiping out where the flowers go. We could do it like that. But I think this time I'm gonna oil it out first. I'm gonna rough out where those two main flowers are gonna go. So this is just linseed oil and a little bit of solvent. I use terps, but Gamsol will do. It's an 8 by 10 inch ampersand gesso board panel. This is just a makeup sponge I'm putting that on with. And then I'm going to wipe it back so I don't have too much on there. And I may try and wipe it back even further in the areas where the flowers are. Let's try something a little bit different today. So I'm going to get a smallish hog. A small hog, a 1. And I'm gonna bit of raw umber. And I'm just gonna kind of lightly sketch out a few of the shapes that I want to put in before I start painting today. So it's going to be like probably somewhere between a wipeout and a drawing out. Ah, it's Naphthol. See, there you go. This is the Schwengingen, whatever it was, red. Paint makers do this all the time. They give esoteric names to things, and then you have a look at the pigment, and it turns out a lot of the time it's a pigment you've already got. Apologies for it taking so long to get into the painting stage today, but let's have a look if we can start to get this sorted out. So, you know, this is about the center of the panel here. This flower, the far right one, is all the way over here. I just want to kind of rough out where it's going to go. Just generally sort of with a sort of straight line kind of shapes. Get an idea of the overall shape of it. Not bothered about it being perfect, you know. Just want to get an idea of where it sits on the panel and how big it is. This one is over here. Actually does come quite close to this one, but not quite there. And it's got these petals, but I'm going to ignore the petals. I just want to get the shape, really. Like the size of it, you know, the envelope that it sits within. That one's going to be about there. These other ones, they're just kind of shapes. I'm intending for this one to paint it, to kind of let go of the realism a little bit. I'm not too bothered about how realistic these flowers look. I'm going to do a lot of it as just kind of shapes, I think. And see how much we can get away with and just kind of make these flowers look like flowers and the rest of it just be kind of, you know, a little bit more vague. But I do want to make sure that the vase is in the right place. So furthest right point. Feeling I've gone too wide on this flower. Furthest right point is going to be probably about here, here-ish. Furthest left point. Over there, the bottom of it, quite near the bottom of the panel, about here. I've set it right over to the left because obviously we've got the flowers coming out to the right. Got a deep shadow here and we've got light over there. So the central kind of axis, if you like, is going to be a little bit to the left of the vertical center, the panel, and that will help me work out this ellipse shape. Maybe something like there. And the rest of it, like, I'm not bothered about drawing out, but one of the things that attracted me to this particular photograph of the several that I took of this subject in different lighting is you get this kind of, this strong almost semicircular shape there. I really like that. I think that's probably enough. Let's chuck some paint in. So big shadow shape over this side. Let's get the darks in. So we want to be like value 2. Low chroma, I've got raw umber. I'm going to add a little bit of lead white. Get a big old brush. Rosemary's ivory. Now, with a fresh brush like this, I like to get a bit of oil on it and then wipe it. Just get it in, you know, that's the bottom of where the shadow comes. I want to get some spatula in today as well. I do like to get the spatula out. But for the time being, let's just think about creating the space. Yeah, so I forgot to say actually, Irina says, it's nice to see you testing out pyrrole and cad yellow. Pyrrole is almost violent in its intensity, yeah, and overpowering in mixtures, but it does get that fiery red if you want to, yeah. So I forgot to mention, Irina, that you actually sent me, what was it in relation to? I think it was this poppy, wasn't it? We were talking about this poppy. You sent me a private message on the community about pyrrole red and cad yellow as a mix. It's incredibly powerful mix, really, really good. So we want a value 5 kind of closer to neutral for around here. So yeah, thank you for that. That's really reminded me of the pyrroles and how powerful they are. And you know, if it's true that we're going to lose our quinacridones, then at least we'll have the pyrroles. So I'm mixing this to about a value 5, mostly raw umber with a little bit of black. So I'm thinking about this as shadow and light. So this is shadow, higher chroma, darker value. Lighter over the other side. And I'm going to move towards it gradually. So this is kind of gets a little bit lighter here. By the time we get over the other side, we're getting towards the value 5. It's going to look really dark when it goes on, of course, at the beginning. Just see how loose we can keep this. Just try and keep the feeling of a kind of a brevity to it. There's a little bit darker over the left side here where the table is. There's a little bit more chroma, so I'm going to bring a little bit of transparent red oxide into it. Actually, that's a good place to be spatularizing, isn't it? And then it gets very light, but still not too much chroma, so in comes the black and the raw umber to bring the chroma down. For the background, I tend to interpret these pretty loosely these days. I'm not really bothered about whether it's, you know, the same as what I see in the photo, as long as I get the feeling of it, you know. And I just want to get the thing covered as quickly as possible and get some texture in there more than anything else. Bit of texture and a bit of life. And anything that doesn't look quite right can easily be fixed later. That's definitely going a little bit too green. Bring a little bit of TRO into it to balance it out. This needs to be quite a lot lighter over here, so I'll just put some white in. Bring that value up. I'm going to get a fresh brush out for this side over here because that gets very light there. Just at the moment, I just want to get the colours and the shapes in. And this was like, I wanted about a value 5 here. Let's see what I've got. Yeah, pretty much. So let's mix some, about value 5, near neutral. It's got a little bit of raw umber in it, so it's not completely neutral. Check my value. Too light. So I'm letting this one go at the beginning, like I'm letting it kind of find its own way. So you can either work on things like in a really careful way right from the beginning, or you can kind of do what I'm doing here and sort of chuck the paint on, make sure it's something like in the area of where general area that you want it to be, and sort it out. And I quite like this because, you know, it's giving me a lot of life and a lot of texture and brush strokes that I'll be able to hopefully keep some of that in. It's got some interest to it, you know. This needs looking at, but for now we'll just see. Fresh brush, flat synthetic, bit of oil, wipe it off. Value 5. Bit dark. We have some almost white out here. It is white basically because it's light traveling through this vase. And I think the vase is probably quite a bit lighter over this side here. So bring in, because there's a bit more light on this side. Sometimes you find with with glass that it goes the opposite way, that you'll have more light on the opposite side from where the light is actually coming in. So let's see, what do I want to do with the values? I want to go darker here. We've actually got a cast shadow on the back wall here. Just making shapes of hopefully about the right value and about the right place. This is where the water is, around there. All this is kind of leaves and flowers. I'm not happy with this green that I've ended up in there. I'm going to take that off because I think it's gonna distract. And it can be, I think it can be, it can feel quite hard to throw yourself into a painting like this. But at the end of the day, you know, at the beginning of a painting, it's all about getting the big shapes right and adjusting them as you go. Making sure things are the right value. And they're about in the right place. And if you can persuade yourself to paint with a kind of looseness, it doesn't always work, you know. Sometimes I'll create things that, you know, are pushed too far and can't seem to pull them back. But most of the time, it's just paint, and you can wipe it off like I just did that green bit if you really, you know, you don't feel it's what you want. So now I'm mixing a little bit more carefully the colour for that front there. It needs to be about a value 6-ish, like this area here. Try a little bit of it on there and see how it looks. It's a bit better. I think it's still a little bit. A little bit more chroma in places. But when it comes to actually putting the paint on, you know, mostly I just want there to be some texture in there, and you can't, there's no way you can paint all of that texture that you can see in that tabletop, but you can kind of, you can suggest it. Or you can create an alternative texture to go in there. That's probably a bit dark. It wants to be, this whole area wants to be just a bit, wants to be darker than the water in the vase, so you can see that that's there. Here it's about the same value, so there isn't really anything to use there to help the vase stand out. A little bit lighter here. I wonder if my camera's a bit underexposed. Let's have a look. Possibly. Trying to match the values that I see, because I'm pretty sure my values are about right. Squinting down, seeing if I can match them more closely. Let's just check that I actually have got 5 there. I think that might be a little bit dark. Clean off some of this mess I've made over here. Got loads of nice textural lumps of paint that might be useful. So I'll keep them. So now I'm going to mix a careful value 5 near neutral. So it's very slightly on the warm side of neutral. So this is just lead white, ivory black and raw umber. That's a good value 5. Get a fresh brush and put a dab of that on and see. Yes, maybe slightly dark. So what I'm looking for is that is the right kind of balance of value and chroma that's going to start to get me, you know, the feeling of the light. The space and the light. I think I'm getting close to the point where I'm going to need to put some of the red in. So that I can see how that's going to work. In fact, let's do that. I'll keep these neutrals. So what was the best one that I had? It was Pyro and Cad Yellow, wouldn't it? Which shall henceforth be known as the Arena Mix. That's so intense. I mean, especially since everything that's in there at the moment is so low chroma. You know, but that's just what we want. You know, we want some nice intense red in there. So I'll stop short of going all the way up to value 5 and just see how that works. There's the light. So for the shadow, I'm going to use that same Pyro, but I'll use this other one. I can't remember which is which now. And I'm going to add transparent red oxide to it. Bring the value right down. The reason I'm using transparent red oxide and not something like, say, black or raw umber is because I want to keep the chroma as high as I possibly can. I could also do transparent red oxide and quinacridone rose, because the quinacridone rose is already darker. It's already a lower value, and it's a blue red, which means I'll need to add more of the TRO, transparent red oxide, to bring that value down, which was in turn send it more orange. So a lot of the time I kind of think of mixing these days as I'm balancing. I've got a target color in mind, you know. It might be vague, like the one I'm going for at the moment. I just want a low value, very high chroma orange-red. And then I'll just, you know, think about what might get me there and what kind of proportions I'll want to use. Try a couple of them. So this one is, that's quinacridone rose and transparent red oxide, and this one is Pyro. There's not a lot to choose between them, I don't think. Let's go with that Pyro mix for a shadow color. Probably don't have enough, but I can always mix up some more of that. So I'm going to use a Rosemary's. I'll use two actually, Rosemary's Angled Eclipse brushes, which I really like for flowers. I think I first heard about these brushes from Kathy Speranza. Astonishingly good flower painter. Let me catch up with the comments, sorry. Thank you. I can't even begin to read out your YouTube handle, but greetings from Frankenmuth. I have no idea where that is, but thank you. That's a really nice comment. Oh, Sandra says, do you think Paul would give us a list of all the high chroma paints? There's not that many of them really, the ones that I use. You know, I always try and keep my paints to a minimum. Naphthol and the pyrols, really high chroma reds. In the yellows, they're mostly the staining organic pigments. In the yellows, obviously cad yellow for an orange yellow, but if you're after a green yellow, then the arylide yellows, like PY3, bright yellow lake, they're really good. Blues, phthalo is the highest. The same with green, phthalo green is the highest. Let's just put a little bit of this on and see how it looks. Okay, it says, I find it really difficult to judge the value of paint I put down by holding the value scale over it. It can be difficult because it's like all of these things, a lot depends on the lighting in your environment. So how close you hold it makes a big difference. So if I hold it really close, it throws it into shadow unless I actually put it on there, which I generally don't like to do because it leaves a mark in the paint. You know, but that's the most reliable way to do it. So I know I've got about a value 5 in my background there. If you don't want to touch the surface, you need to pull it forward enough so that, you know, it's not creating shadow area. So the reason I left those areas white is so that I can still get like the highest chroma. I'm so tired today. Let's try shadow color. Next to that. It's getting there, that red. I mean, it's intense. I think possibly even wiping out, I might have struggled to get, you know, quite the chroma that I would want there. So I'm going to kind of fill this flower in here a bit more so there's no white here so that I can see a little bit better, like against the background, paint the background around it a bit better. Get an impression of how close I'm coming with this high chroma. So this needs to be darker here still. I'm going to do it like really generally, just get the shapes in. And see what I might need to change. can't hit quite the chroma and the value at the same time of that red. So I've gone for a little lower value and a little higher chroma. So I'm gradually bringing down the value of what's around it a little bit more, I think, than it really is, just to kind of get the, hopefully get the balance and get that red really standing out. I'm trying to find a kind of a happy medium between painting all the detail of this flower and then and it being such a strong statement of red, because the more I paint into it, the more I'm going to compromise that strong red that I put down. So I don't want to put too much in it. I don't want to start working into detail because I'll lose that strong red if I do. Trying to put in as much in, like really simply, and have it work, and then not have to paint over it again, and then you know, the paint will stay fresher. That is intense. That's really intense red. So I think I probably can pull value back a little bit here now. I'm also dropping the chroma in the background here deliberately, so that hopefully also will help the red to come through more strongly. Get some more pyrrole out, the pyrrole mix for the light, because I've mixed too much shadow into it now and it's not pure anymore. I can't remember which one was the best one. Honestly, there doesn't seem to be a lot to choose between them. I'd say the Williamsburg one feels a bit stiffer maybe, and a bit more opaque. Feels like it's covering a little bit better maybe. But to be fair, this isn't really a very careful test because I've got a little bit confused about which one I was using where. I'm going to need more cad as yellow as well. changes everything, right? It really is all about the relationships. And it's very hard to visualize. I know I repeat this a lot, but it's because it's a very true thing. It's good to bear in mind at the beginning of a painting. It's really tempting to start making corrections before you've got all of the panel covered, before you've got all of the value areas in. But it's much better if you can leave the kind of the correction making time of part of painting of the initial painting layer until you've got at least the panel covered and the main colors in, because it's very hard to visualize what's happening with the rest of these colors here without having all of the, without having any of the red in. I mean, the red is so strong. It's such an important part of the painting. Without it in there, it's very, very difficult to judge whether the colors are working or not. Pretty much impossible, in fact, really. So, although it's tempting to start thinking like near the beginning of a painting, oh, maybe this bit is wrong, maybe I should change this. And I did do a bit of that, to be fair. But at the same time, you've kind of got to be aware that it's very difficult to judge until you have enough done that you can see all the relationships. Like this flower is difficult to see until I've got all of the background in around it. Slightly different method this time than last week, where I did this but I covered the whole panel and then wiped out. This time it's similar, still established the main the kind of environment that it's sitting in first. I find it incredibly difficult to paint if I don't have that established, if I can't see the relationships, the color relationships as they're going down. I'm not trying to paint with too much accuracy here, but I am trying to at least I would say I'm trying to paint with a reasonable amount of color accuracy, let's say. To get the relationships between the colors right, but I'm not particularly bothered about the drawing so much. I need a green shadow color, which I don't have, so let's make up one of those. So that's about the right value that I want, but it's very, very blue-green. So if I get some just green gold, mix a bit of the blue-green into it. So I'll be down like about a value 3-ish, because there's a green shadow area against this flower, and I want to see that. Difficult to get it in there. I want to see the green here against the red. Doesn't want to cover. I'm trying to, one of the ways that I think about this, establishing the colors at the start, is, especially if I'm trying to get, trying to stay fairly close to the colours of the subject, is I think of it as a story, as a colour story. And you kind of need all of the chapters in there before you can see if the story is going to work or not. That's probably a very imperfect analogy, but it's very difficult to decide whether something is working or not properly. That's nailed. That orange, that green there, that was mixed off Chroma Magic, and it's really nice. I can mix between these if I want something in between, like there's a shadow green down here. Got some very light greens too. Almost yellow here. So I'm not actually trying to paint the leaves at the moment. I'm just looking for colours around this flower and just putting them in. And if they're in the right place, the leaves will kind of, hopefully anyway, they will mostly take care of themselves. And I'm not particularly bothered about, any real accuracy with them. Let's get start filling in some of this area so I can start to see that working a bit better as well. So they're all pretty dark around here. It goes a bit more orange. It's all towards our shadow color. Transparent red oxide and pyrrole, yeah. Actually, you need to be careful how much pyrrole goes into it though, because it's so strong. So I'm just trying to get these in as colour notes at the moment more than anything. I'm building a jigsaw puzzle of colour notes. Trying not to worry too much at the moment how much something looks like a thing. And trying to stay more aware of, here, does it look like there's light in there? And if I put something in, does it look like there's more light or does it look like there's less? Just filling in the space. Trying to put the right colour in the right place. Sorry, not much talking today. Partly because this is hard. And partly because my energy levels are somewhat depleted. And I'm having trouble to focus on talking and painting at the same time today. other thing that really interests me about this was the kind of the semi-abstract nature of these light, little areas of light in there. Highlights. You know, there comes a point, I guess it's different for everybody, and you know, depending on how you work, but there comes a point for me where I can feel that it's going to work. And I might just be getting close on that now, where I can tell, you know, there was a point earlier on where it was like semi-panic at the beginning where I couldn't really see it. And I was worried about whether it was going to come out or not. It kind of feels like I'm through the worst of that. And I can, now, you know, I'm getting to the point where I can squint and I can see, basically because almost everything is filled in now, I can squint and I can see how things are working. I can get an impression of basically, I think all of this doesn't really need to be painted much, as long as the flowers work well. You know, as long as those two flowers there work really well. I'm going to cast shadow of the bowl. It's not going to work if it doesn't have a shadow. Brush is way too big, so I'll just do the thing bigger than it needs to be and then take it out. Actually, I don't mind it being too big there. So there's a point where you, for me, this is how it works. Like there's a point where there's enough realism starting to happen. There's enough recognizable, I can feel the space. I'm beginning to feel the space and feel the light, that I can start to see a lot of the more kind of wild painting that I put in at the start, the very brushy, expressive stuff starts to become, instead of looking like just random mess, it starts to look like really nice texture that brings the painting to life. But until I can see enough of the painting, I've lost that shape. Until I can see enough of the painting to know, until it's got that kind of balance between reality and abstract. The abstract stuff just doesn't work to me at all, and it worries me. Or at least it worried me a lot in this one until I've got, you know, a little bit further through and I can see it now. This part is proving tricky. Sorry, I haven't kept up with the comments at all today. I will try shortly. So I'm wiping out some areas where I'm going to put the stems in. It's like, they're like a low chroma yellow-green. I've got green, gold, white, cad yellow. I don't think I needed the cad yellow actually. And probably a little bit of black to drop the chroma. But the crucial thing I think really with them is the value. The stems. Oh, what happened there? Picked up some red. I didn't want that at all. No. Got a mistake in our painting now. Red where there should be no red. So have we got the red? I think we're not. I think we're not far off just by keeping it, by using the arena mix. for the red. Pyrrole and cad yellow, highest possible chroma for an orange red at that value. Yeah, I mean that red is singing out, and everything else is very low chroma there too. Yeah, I think this is better like this than it would be if I tried to make a really careful painting of those flowers. I think it's better left with the red singing out like that. There's just about enough in the leaves to feel like a little bit of light and shadow in there. Maybe it could do with a little bit more there. But frankly, I'm going to leave it there today because I'm exhausted. I was really tired going into this one today, and that required holding a lot of focus to be able to not have that completely fall apart on me. And it's just at a kind of, I feel like it's just at a point now where it's at the tipping point. I've established most of what needs to be in there, and if I push it too much further, I have a strong feeling that it's going to fall over the edge and my focus will go and something will go horribly wrong. So I'm going to restrict myself to a few small edits. Watch me destroy it now. Watch me just that shape. It's bothering me. Like I'm always saying that about these paintings, like another session, would it be better with another session? This one possibly, possibly, but it's got the spirit of the subject. It feels like to me it's got the spirit of it in there at the moment. So probably work in bringing in a little bit more detail here and there, but. I kind of feel like as a collection of colour notes and edges, it's beginning to suggest what the subject is, and I feel like maybe that's it. If I felt like I had more focus and maybe would work on it for a little bit longer and bring a little bit more detail out here and there in some areas, but I'm not convinced it needs a lot more really now, because it's all about this. It's mostly the red, you know. Yeah. Thank you very much for coming, everybody. I'm sorry I've been a rubbish host and have just basically painted, but that did take everything I've got to make sure that worked at all, and didn't go south really quickly. And I really think the key with this is keeping it really simple and just making it a collection of color notes, because that's really what it's about. It's about that intense red. Listen, if for those of you who are in the school or in the community, I've got a bunch more reference photos of this same subject. Well, I'll post them up there so you can have a play with them if you want to have a look at them and see what you think and what you like. and maybe have a go at doing another one, you know. But I've got to sign off now or I'm going to fall over. Thank you very much for coming, everyone. Have a lovely weekend. I hope you enjoyed the session, even though I wasn't talking much. And I'll see you again very soon. Bye for now.